Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here.
All right, now before we get into the nitty-gritty of health care law, obviously the news about Rick Santorum bowing out of the race pretty much creates the general election scene now. It's Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. And tell me, what do you see as the role of health care reform, given what Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts, and then, of course, the Affordable Care Act in this presidential race?
Well, it almost takes it off the table. I'm not sure that Governor Romney can talk about it, talk about the Affordable Care Act with a great deal of integrity when they passed basically the same thing in Massachusetts. So I think it kind of neutralizes the issue as far as the general election is concerned.
So what then would be the Republicans' biggest arrows against the Democrats and President Obama?
I think the only case the Republicans have really is that and I don't agree with them, of course, but that the economy hasn't recovered fast enough, and that President Obama could have done more. I think that's really the only case they have. I think Romney's biggest problem, though, is not substantive. I think that when you see this recent poll that showed that on the question of likability and favorability, he has a 38-point deficit. I don't know how you overcome that, and that's really how most people make their presidential choice. It's a gut-level feeling about whether they trust the individual, whether they like the person. It's really not as much based on issues. So I think that's the biggest hurdle he's going to have.
So you think President Obama can position himself as more of the man of the people?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it.
Well, going back to the Affordable Care Act and the similarities, I asked Senator McConnell about that, and he said no, they're two different things because states have the power to enact these type of mandates, whereas he argues the federal government doesn't. I want you to hear what exactly he said.
All right.
So it's a totally different thing. For example, a state right now can order you, and most states do, if you're going to drive a car, to buy car insurance. I don't think there's any question that a state, and one state has, Massachusetts, could order you, make you, buy health insurance. But that's not what's before the Supreme Court.
So do you agree? Are they two different things?
Well, I think there is a difference, yes, but I don't agree with his conclusion that this is unconstitutional. There have been courts, including the Second Circuit in Washington, D.C., with two very conservative justices concurring that this was constitutional, the individual mandate. And the Supreme Court justices in the oral arguments, basically, even the conservative ones, basically said it would be okay to tax Americans and give them insurance, as we do with Medicare. I think the real issue is, and I think this is one that is controversial and certainly debatable, is whether the Constitution would allow you to mandate buying insurance by any commercial commodity, yes. And I think that's a justiciable issue, and the court's going to get to that. But but the question of whether the Congress can mandate that individuals have health insurance, I don't think that's a question. I don't think that's even debatable.
Why not? I mean, do you think that falls under the Commerce Clause?
It clearly does. And again, several of the lower courts have decided that. And again, conservative ones. We do that right now with Medicare. You don't have to take the insurance, actually, but you have to pay for it. And so I think there's ample precedent for that, and I think the court will say that.
Do you see any other way to build or construct that law without the mandate in order to preserve the ability that people with pre-existing conditions can get health coverage?
I really don't, unless you essentially expand Medicare or expand Medicaid to cover everyone, or to cover everyone who can't get commercial insurance. That is a way to do it.
Would you prefer that, or would you prefer the way the Affordable Care Act went?
I've always been somebody who's preferred a single-payer system, not necessarily a Canadian system or a British system, but a single-payer system, as every other industrialized nation in the world has. I don't think insurance should be tied to your employer. I think it's an economic stagnation device. I mean, it basically prohibits a lot of mobility within the economy. We're an aberration. Nobody else does it this way. So I think some kind of universal plan where everybody has their own insurance is far preferable to even this.
A lot of people talk about one of the cost drivers to American healthcare being the inefficiencies in the system. Do you think a single-payer system where the government covers healthcare, do you think that is better at addressing the inefficiencies than a capitalist quasi-market-based system?
Well, it certainly has been with regard to Medicare. Medicare is a far more efficient system than private insurance system, and the administrative costs are down under 3% versus anywhere from 10 to 20% in the private sector. So yes, I think it can be more efficient. Again, we would have to work to come up with the right kind of plan, but I think it's doable. And just to go back quickly to your last question, 2/3 of the bill, the Affordable Care Act, deal with Medicare and Medicaid. So those parts of the law clearly could function independently of the even if the individual mandate were thrown out.
So regardless of what the Supreme Court does, that will be in place. Yeah. Well, and on those points, you actually had made some news with a very sharp, pointed letter to Senator McConnell about some of the things he wrote about in a recent Courier Journal column that he wrote. We have a little clip of kind of setting the tone of what you have. Let's check what you said. You said, quote, "When distortions and misinformation are allowed to displace the facts, each individual and every business in our state is left at a disadvantage that could cost them time, money, or much worse, their health." Specifically, what did you think was the most egregious thing that Senator McConnell wrote about that is just not true?
Well, first of all, he said that the average consumer would pay $2,100 more under the Affordable Care Act. Clearly not true.
Some could, though.
Some could. A very small percentage if they choose what's called a Cadillac plan or the silver plan in the actual law. But the vast majority of citizens would actually have their premiums reduced. And we're talking about people who are actually buying insurance in the private market on an individual basis, not group insurance plans. But if you throw out a number and say the average person is going to pay $2,100 more a year, certainly people are going to say, well, that's not a good plan. So, I mean, he's deceiving my constituents and his constituents. I know what he's trying to do. This has been a carefully orchestrated plan from opponents, Republican opponents from the beginning. They just want to knock the plan. They've done a good job of that. And that's why you get, when you ask people about individual provisions of the Affordable Care Act, has overwhelming support. When you say Obamacare, it's because of misleading statements like this, gross distortions of fact that create this overall sense of opposition. This can't be good for us. In fact, it is good for most people.
All right, last thing I wanted to ask you about, because we're running out of time, but Medicaid, there is an effect in the Affordable Care Act to Medicaid in which states could pay slightly more later as they add more people. But as you point out in your letter, the federal government's going to cover most of that cost, right?
The federal government's paying 100% of the added Medicare cost up to 2019, and then a little over 90% thereafter. So it allows the states actually to cover far more people with very little added cost. And what's also lost in that argument is the other provisions of the Affordable Care Act also allow individuals who might have to rely on Medicaid to get other kinds of coverage.
All right. Well, Congressman, thanks. Much more to talk about later in the week with you about that.